In this program, we look for clues to our own sexuality. In the lives of our fellow creatures and in our distant past. East Africa, the lakes and plains of the Great Rift Valley. It's a day some 2 million years ago. A group of apes moves along a shoreline, traveling, hunting. This is Homo habilis, the first species of human. These early humans were taking advantage of great changes in the world. The climate was getting drier, and these apes were moving out of the forest and into a new landscape, the savanna. Nearly everything about us, our physiques, our diets, our social systems, and our sexual identities, we inherited to some extent from ancestors like this. But what do we know about them? The main clues are only some stone tools and fossils, and not very many of those. The best we can do is speculate. We might begin by looking at the only other primate to have moved out onto the plains, the baboon. Baboons would have a lot of the same problems as early humans, and might be solving them the same way. Both primates evolved from a line of forest animals, but in an open land, they faced a new problem: large predators. For defense, the early humans would almost certainly have lived like modern baboons, in groups. Groups are also good at protecting a territory and the food in it. There are certain stresses to groups, but the general security makes them worth the tensions of living together. And societies add an extra dimension to sex. For one thing, the sexes have different priorities. The female's main reproductive interest is in their vulnerable young. Security is important to them. Strong social bonds help protect the young. The males, whose main reproductive interest is in mating with as many females as possible, become hangers-on, petitioners to the females, who make their own choices among the males. Did ancestral human women shape our species by constantly rejecting and choosing ancestral men according to their looks and behavior? Baboon society is shaped by the same environmental pressures that early humans faced, but there are important differences between our two species. Even the first humans were much larger than baboons, and more importantly, they hunted for meat. Hunting would have been all but impossible for human females with infants that are helpless for so many years. That meant that unlike baboons, human males were important to human females long after the child was born. Perhaps there's another place to look for clues to how early men and women behaved. We can look back in the forest, where our closest relatives still live. Chimpanzees. Can they tell us anything about our ancestors' sexual behavior? Chimp communities are about the same size as baboon communities, 50 to 60 animals. But in the forest, they're less exposed to predators, and so they don't have to band together quite so tightly. Just as the bonding is a little looser than with baboons, so is the mating system. Females give birth only about once every 4 years, and they seldom mate at all unless they're in estrus. Then they mate with virtually any male. For the males at this time, that means mating can be almost constant. Their large testes alone tell us this. They are much larger than human testes. That's because they're the male's way of competing. There's seldom any actual fighting over the females, but the male with the largest testes is able to copulate more often. The female swellings, too, are part of this system, known as the multi-male system. Their color, swelling, and smell tell the males who is in estrus and who isn't. The redder the female genitalia, the more excited the males become, and the more likely they are to enter the competition. Another clue to their sexual system is the animal's size. The males aren't much larger than the females. This usually indicates that the males hardly ever fight each other over sex. If we look at ourselves, the size ratio of men to women is about the same as it is in chimps. But there's one difference that's impossible to overestimate. Human females have no visible estrus display. There's no external way to tell when a woman is ready to conceive. How did this human characteristic evolve, and how did it affect relations between the sexes? Looking at fossils, of course, is looking at bones, not behavior. And in any case, very few Homo habilis bones have ever been found. We do know that they used tools extensively, and that their feet were just as important as their hands. They had evolved to walk upright, and that's one of the reasons we give them the name Homo, human. Because of the tools, we call them habilis, handy. Handy man. A significant difference between Homo habilis and both chimps and baboons was diet. Primates generally eat fruit and leaves, but there's not enough of these on the plains, not all year round, and so the plains apes became hunters as well as gatherers. And if not hunting, they were scavenging. Like all monkeys and apes, they had hands that had evolved originally for getting around in trees. They were surely one species that could steal a leopard's stored kill. And some of the stone tools that have been discovered suggest that they used their brains to make up for the lack of a leopard's cutting teeth. On the plains, they would have been as vulnerable to predators as baboons, and would probably have traveled in the same kind of tight, coordinated bands. The places where their bones, teeth, and tools have been found suggest that they had home bases, perhaps on cliff sides. Their teeth tell us that large male canine teeth had given way to smaller, more human ones. Perhaps large teeth, used for defense and display, were no longer an advantage in a people now using tools and living in communities. Males needed new characteristics for a changing world. We may never know much more. And that's about all we can assume about the social life of Homo habilis and that chapter in our ancestry. But 500,000 years later, another chapter opens. It's the same East African plain, populated by virtually the same animals that surrounded Homo habilis. The humans, though, had been changing rapidly, evolving into a new animal. Homo erectus. Homo erectus made a living on the plains in much the same way that Homo habilis probably did, hunting and stealing kills from the bigger predators. But this human's brain was a good deal bigger than its predecessors, though still appreciably smaller than the modern human brain. While he existed, Homo erectus was the planet's intellectual, and he existed for about 1.5 million years, until modern man succeeded him a mere 200,000 years ago. Homo erectus was a prodigious traveler. He left fossils not only in Africa, but in the Middle East, China, Java, and Europe. From these fossils, we can make deductions about the social and sex lives of these people. For example, male skeletons are only 20% larger than female ones, about the same as humans today. And their larger brains meant larger heads, so babies had to be born even less developed in order to fit through the birth canal. Now a baby demanded more care than ever, and its survival depended on the constant effort of both mother and father. It was becoming important for females to find a mate willing to be a partner in rearing the young. That could have meant competition among the females for the best providers. For the smaller sex, competition is less likely to mean fighting than display. A female would have to signal health and fitness for childbearing. Swollen breasts could have evolved simply to attract males. Modern human females are the only primates that have permanently swollen breasts. Modern human females are also among the few female primates that don't signal when they are ovulating, when they are ready to conceive. That could have evolved as a way of keeping the valuable male providers guessing, of keeping them attentive all the time. These are the kinds of conditions that can allow for strong pair bonding. No one can know whether they were monogamous, but they were heading in that direction. In fact, monogamy, now the most common mating system among humans, could be a legacy that started with Homo erectus. What other legacies have been left us by our immediate ancestors and by evolution in general, both near and distant? If we looked at ourselves as though we'd never seen ourselves before, what could we make of the modern human? We would see an upright walking animal like Homo erectus, but slightly larger and with not very much size difference between the sexes. We'd see a lot of investment in a few young. We'd see family groups that included males, indicating that fathers help provide for the young. But we'd also see individuals that through the development of intelligence have become different from all other animals. Humans are said to be the only animals who can choose not to reproduce, whose intellects can override their genes. Even so, having a family is the focus of most people's lives, and human families are rich and complex. They're full of relationships, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, in-laws and cousins. They hold the generations together. Generations past their reproductive years help to raise their children's children. In societies as complicated as ours, families are our first all-important framework for learning about the world. And not surprisingly, it's much the same for other youngsters. A baby rhesus macaque is also born into a world of demanding social do's and don'ts. The babies themselves are irresistible to females too young to have babies of their own. This is the little one's aunt, a close female relation who feels she has a claim to the infant. The baby's mother, the aunt's older sister, decides all this attention has gone far enough. The aunt tries to pacify her sister by grooming her, a calming and bonding activity. They're joined by the grandmother, who grooms her youngest daughter. Mother macaques always favor their youngest daughters. Secure in her own mother's presence, the young aunt tries again for the baby. Tired of this struggle, the mother walks off. But aunt and grandmother aren't far behind. With her mother's backing, the aunt tries one more grab for the baby. The grandmother rises to her defense, but the mother makes off with the baby. Primates aren't the only ones that rely on their relatives. These African wild dogs, far more distant to humans than macaques, live in one of the largest extended families of any large animal. The pack is made up of aunts, uncles, siblings, all working together to feed themselves and one litter of pups, the offspring of the dominant male and female in the pack. A single litter can have 15 to 20 pups, so everybody pitches in to feed them, guard them, and teach them. But that's all right with the others because they're all closely related. They share genes and share work. This kind of assisted monogamy would be chaos without a strict hierarchy. And one of the first things the pups have to learn is how to establish their place in it. Feeding the family means bringing home meat. A pack is essentially a family hunting association, designed to bring down prey animals that would be too big or too fast for one dog to bring down by itself. This takes organization, discipline, intelligence, and cooperation. When the hunters come home, they feed the little ones. The dogs have swallowed the food from the kill, but only as a way of carrying it. When the pups nudge an adult's mouth, they receive their share of wildebeest. It's largely the dog's diet that makes them monogamous. Soon after the pups are born, carnivore fathers can provide as well as mothers, and the two work together. But the litter is so large that they need help, and because they need so much meat, all the dogs need each other. The dogs lead a dangerous life and rely on the pack for survival. We no longer hunt down our own food, but our modern society has survival challenges of its own. The partners we choose have everything to do with the quality of our lives. So what characteristics do we look for in a mate? How do we choose among all the faces in the crowd? Underlying the features we find attractive are characteristics important to survival, whether we're from a concrete jungle or a real one. Sometimes, however, it's hard to tell just what some creatures see in each other. These are proboscis monkeys living in the jungles of Borneo. The females, like all primates, spend their lives raising a few precious young. And in the all-important choice of a mate, they're curiously attracted to pot bellies and pendulous noses. Just what such a nose could signify to her, we may never know, but it is distinctly male. She doesn't have a nose like his at all. The fact that the sexes look different reflects the fact that they have different roles to play and different priorities in reproduction. This female orangutan looks like a large version of her baby, but the male is much more imposing. Male orangutans are at least twice the size of females and lead solitary lives. They're no help in raising the young. Their contribution is simply to offer strong, healthy genes to females. And so their bodies have simply become bigger and more powerful. Males set out to win the competition among themselves with their size and strength. And in orangutans, these traits will win a female as well. But for other males, there are two different contests, because beating the other guy doesn't always mean getting the girl. Human males are also primates that are larger than their females, but only by about 20%. This tells us that size and strength are important for men, but not as important as they are for orangutans. There must also be other criteria by which men are judged. Yet physical prowess was once important in hunting and basic survival. To some extent, it still impresses women, and this has played a part in how men look. Generations of women, by inspiring competition and by choosing strong men to father their children, have helped create the male body with its potential for muscle development. A woman trying to develop her muscles in competition with men is beaten from the start. It's not her method of competing. Her body has been molded by different biological forces. And by men selecting women on their apparent ability to produce and take care of children, healthy-looking breasts, childbearing hips. Whether those features are still as important in childcare as they once were is probably beside the point. The point is that men still respond to them. But not everything we respond to sexually has a reproductive function. A male peacock's tail is no use at all, except as a symbol, a sign of good health and good genes. It's a signaling device that's developed in peacocks simply because peahens respond to it. For humans, outlined eyes and red lips do the same. They call attention to our primary signaling features, the eyes and mouth. Men will respond to that even when they know that the lips have been painted, exaggerated. It's a kind of genetic reflex. With makeup, the genetic message has been entirely obliterated by the medium. But what it tells us about humans is that both sexes compete for the best partner. And when men compete for women, there's no reason why they can't use makeup too. It's in the best tradition of the peacock's tail. These are men of the Wadabi tribe in West Africa, getting ready for their display ceremony. The women observe and judge. The ceremony the men prepare for is a beauty contest. For the Wadabi, beauty is everything. They own almost nothing and wander with their cattle across the dry reaches of the Sahel. With elaborate face painting, singing, and dancing, these beguiling people celebrate their greatest possession, the human body. What we call beautiful may differ from culture to culture, but the basic qualities that humans are looking for in each other seem to be universal. This is a bride market in Morocco. Men and women come here for the unashamed and honest purpose of shopping for a mate.
قبل تربات ما درت كان من بعد
هذا قبل تزن الدنيا يزن حولي يزن المهم تخشي الناس سكر يزن الفولكر نيتي تمون النيت ادوين تربات الناد دون صغرى يسلم
يعني خي ما تريزنا التيريز
الياز النتيري خشنا الياز شويه حرام الياز زين وريدا شان المونا هذه تاع نص شال المونا
في تغذيه
هذه غزيه هذول تكزير هذه الياز اغز اي زين غزيه
35 عام
Men and women have many ways of evaluating each other. And along with physical attributes, they measure the type of life a partner can provide. The male who's already collected valuable resources is, in effect, a certainty as a provider for the young. In the world humans have created, the resources themselves are of human design. A man with an expensive car and stylish clothes would be likely to have the resource that matters most in our society, money. A woman may evaluate a man's wealth as an indication of the investment he could make in her children. Our preoccupation with wealth may sound unromantic, but who's to say that the accumulation of material wealth isn't done specifically to attract the opposite sex? The male satin bowerbird of Australia is busy doing just that. He's hard at work on a bower. It's a structure of pure romance, intended solely to woo females. Unlike human wealth, it's not a useful measure of potential investment in the young. He's just showing off. Using carefully selected twigs, he builds 2 columns and given time, an arch across the top. He now sets out to decorate the bower. This particular species of bowerbird has an affinity for blue. Blue flowers, blue feathers, anything blue he can find. Neighboring male satin bowerbirds will raid each other's territories and plunder the bowers for the blue trimmings. He lays out a sort of blue carpet to guide a female to his masterpiece. Finally, a female spots it and drops down for a viewing. He adds his own display to the general effect. Then she sends a signal, perhaps by stepping between the columns and not stepping out again. And the bower serves its purpose. That's all it's for. She'll make a nest herself somewhere else, somewhere hidden and safe. It's because females can be so choosy that males go to such great lengths to please them. Even the best male, the most dominant, is not always the female's first choice. This male olive baboon is keeping close to a female that's come into breeding condition. He's been attentive and gentle with both the female and her baby in an effort to solidify the relationship. In spite of their friendship, the male must still be on the lookout for rivals who want to oust him. There's a delicate balance between the rights of dominance among the males and the female's own choice of suitors. Sure enough, the pair is not alone. The male on the left watches the female as he eats. And on her right is another male hoping to move in, hoping that she'll choose to mate with him. But this time, all the attention pays off. She mates with her faithful follower. Often, the only way a male can be sure the offspring are his is to make sure that the female is his. We call this possessive behavior mate guarding. To make sure that she never has a chance to mate with another male, he has to guard her. He has to be possessive. and he has to signal that state of possession to other males. There are plenty of ways in the grammar of body language to do that. But human males generally have only one female to keep an eye on. For the male animals that have many, the rigors of ensuring their genes' future can be overwhelming. On the beaches at breeding season, male elephant seals have one of two options: a huge harem or nothing. And the bulls with a harem not only have to keep permanently alert for the deprived bulls, but have to assert their dominance over the females too, constantly, tirelessly. A female can have only one pup at a time. She's let the male get next year's pup started, but her main investment is in this year's, in its individual life, in quality as opposed to the male's push for quantity. Human females, too, invest as heavily as any animal in the quality of their babies. When a woman is nursing, milk production alone takes up to 30% of her bodily energy. Back when it all started, she contributed an egg thousands of times larger than the sperm that fertilized it. Then she lent her body as an incubator and source of all nourishment for the embryo. Now she's only got about 18 years to go. It's typical of many females that life is primarily about nurturing the next generation. Wallabies are a good example. From the beginning of adulthood until death, a female produces one baby after another. Often a new one is started before an older one is even out of the pouch. Because they're marsupials, baby wallabies skip the umbilical stage and begin nursing in the pouch, when they are still, in effect, embryos. They stay there until they're almost half their mother's size. This means that there is never a stage in the female wallaby's adulthood when she isn't producing milk. Because of the high energetic costs of motherhood, females must evaluate potential fathers with a critical eye. As this young, dominant male macaque is about to find out. With the help of his powerful female relatives, he has become the leader of his natal group. This is unusual because most males leave their groups when they become sexually mature. He approaches a female and gives her a hip push as an invitation to mate. She totally ignores him. This indifference is quite a blow to one used to getting his own way. Not easily discouraged, he follows her with a proudly raised tail, symbol of his dominance. But right behind is another male, a low-ranking newcomer to the troop, who's noticed the young leader is having some trouble. And sure enough, when the newcomer is left alone, the female returns and begins courting this comparative stranger. Despite his lack of status, she clearly prefers him over the young leader. The stranger wants no trouble with the young leader and quickly withdraws when he strolls by. But as soon as the danger is past, the female returns to her clandestine courtship. Despite the young leader's dominance, this female's behavior is telling him it's time to leave the troop. The female's innate attraction for newcomers is a way of ensuring genetic diversity in the group. He'll have to find mating partners by becoming a newcomer himself. A predilection for genetic diversity and social taboos against inbreeding can be seen in all human cultures. We protect ourselves from genetic disease when, as children, we learn a sexual aversion to our siblings. The best evidence of this comes from studies of Israeli kibbutzim. Almost everyone in this kibbutz is unrelated, and yet the lifestyle is like a large family's. The children are raised like brothers and sisters. When the marriage patterns of almost 3,000 children were analyzed, it was discovered that not one marriage occurred between children raised in the same group. The aversion to brother-sister incest is so strong that it can be triggered just by close familiarity. When these children grow up, just like macaques, they will seek partners outside what they think of as their families. Throughout this program, we've seen that our sex lives have much in common with those of our fellow creatures. But as we discover more about the nature of the human animal, the question is, what, if anything, makes us different? Some might say it's the way we walk. Others claim it's how we talk and think. But surely there is something else we pass along and leave behind that also sets us apart. Human culture, which finds expression in art. Cultures down through the centuries and around the world have used art to explore the mysteries of sex and our own creation. The forms of male and female well up in the imagination to express our primal urges. These images are so strong, so fundamental, that they are able to sell us virtually anything. And of course, it's not just images that are for sale. Sex itself is on the market. It's called the oldest profession, and it's built on physical needs and fantasies. Our fantasies can be turned into entertainment. Nothing more really than the old male competition and female selection at work. Our rituals of courtship and display often take place in an arena of pure fantasy, with lights and music designed to stimulate our imaginations. Sex has affected everything about us as human beings. We are creatures driven to bonding, to finding a partner, a mate, even if that partnership could never produce a child. And even if those years are far behind us, we have discovered that we are not so different from many other animals, and that the roots of our sexual identities lie in the survival needs of the past. And just in case we think our intellect and imagination give our sexual conduct a social significance unknown in the animal kingdom, meet the bonobo chimpanzees of the forests of Zaire. A legend of the Mongandu people of Zaire tells of how these chimps and the ancestors of humans once lived as brothers. And indeed, some primate specialists think the bonobo may closely resemble the common ancestor of humans and apes. They are our closest living relatives, closer to us than they are to gorillas. They have complex vocalizations, permanent close friendships, cliques, and jealousies. And in this society, sex is a basic form of communication. It seems to infuse everything from simple expressions of affection to the establishment of hierarchies. Bonobos sometimes mate face to face. We once thought only humans used such an intimate position. But their versatility knows no bounds. Every member of the troop is a potential sexual partner. Females rub genitals with other females, as do males with other males. Even the youngsters get involved. We may find all this sex excessive, even shocking, but bonobos make important use of it. Sex has virtually replaced violence in their society. The aggression seen in other primates, even in other chimp societies, bonobos are able to live without. In this African rainforest, far away from our strife-torn civilization, sex is managing to keep the peace. Next time on The Nature of Sex. Seahorses mate, but it's the father who gives birth. How we arrive in the world is different for each species. Sex is different too, but we all hope to carry on into the next generation, passing along what's best in us. Sex can truly be a miracle in the making. Next time on The Nature of Sex.